Welcome to TaiwanTalks, covering the latest global news on a Taiwan perspective. I'm Albert Chiu. The past weekend, the world was shaken by a remarkable event, a military coup unfolding in Russia, coinciding with ongoing Russian troops' invasion of Ukraine. Despite the uneasy peace, the coup attempt signals unprecedented challenge to Putin's hold on power. Joining us today are Lev Nachman, National Zhengzhi University College of Social Science Assistant Professor, Jiho Zhang, DPP Keelung City Councilor and a former speechwriter for Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, and Jason Hsu, Senior Research Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School Ash Center and a former KMT legislator. A very warm welcome to all on the show. All right. My first question goes to Lev. While the immediate threat of the coup may have subsided, it's crucial to understand the inner working of the Putin's governing group in order to assess the strengths and weaknesses of his rule. Putin is often viewed as the sole authoritarian leader in Russia. However, he also relies on the support of oligarchs holding control over key domestic industries. So could you share some light on how these royalists bolster Putin's autocratic regime for our audience?
Yeah, so when Putin came into power, there was a previous generation of oligarchs who had control over key state industries. And over the years, as Putin stayed in power, there were many different purges against these oligarchs and leading business authorities in Russia, and they were replaced with people that Putin either had control over or that he had better relations with. Putin is also known for being very close and to his friends and allowing them certain levels of authority and autonomy within Russia. For example, the leader of the Wagner Group himself is actually an old friend of Putin's. And it's not just a matter of that they were old friends, but that they've shared years of trying to create Russia in kind of their own image together. The other challenge is that Putin himself, the worry is that he surrounds himself with people that want to please him and tell him things that he wants to hear. This is kind of a big authoritarian leader's dilemma in that they're actually maybe getting imperfect information because all of the oligarchs and all of the leaders that Putin has put in power has this new dilemma of wanting to make sure they stay in power and keeping Putin pleased, and so will therefore sort of tell him information that might not be perfect.
So for Jiho, so do you think that in this attempted coup, even though it was a failure in the end by Wagner Group, is a sign of Putin's waning power?
Yeah, I think so, and I believe that when Wagner Group was marching into Moscow, I'm pretty sure there were some inside connections from Moscow, from Kremlin, for Prigozhin to have the confidence to march. But somewhere along the way, probably something went wrong, and the contact probably changed the mind. So that therefore they halted the whole march. And it became a sort of a failure, but that also that tells us that there are cracks within the Kremlin and the Moscow elites, that things have been shaky, and I believe that this is the beginning of a shaky future for Moscow, at least for the foreseeable couple of months.
Okay. Coming up next, we have Hsu Jing-yun, Associate Professor at the Graduate Institute of Russian Studies, National Zhengzhi University. She provides eye-opening insights into Putin's ruling structure. Let's take a look.
The onset of the attempted coup led to beliefs that the invasion of Ukraine will soon end. However, the hope of peace just turned to dust in very short time. Why is this so?
普京的行事作风一直以来都非常果断、确实、迅速，这其实就是他带给人民的一个很强大的一个领导者的印象。所以这个基本上，这也是俄罗斯人民为什么那么支持普京的一个原因。瓦格纳基本上对普京而言就是一颗棋子，来对向世人或是向他的国人展现，他可以控制局势，他可以控制全局。瓦格纳这一次的叛变，基本上觉得应该都已经有被预测到了。因为在这之前，瓦格纳的那个领导者、负责人Prigozhin，他就一直在像在那个 Instagram 上面，然后呢去发表一些就是演说那这些直播或演说呢都有剑指就是国防部长绍伊古 还有就是剑指参谋总长。好，那他会认为说是普京用人不当，而且国防部6月的时候有发布命令，然后说任何不是归属于俄罗斯国防军队的都要跟国防部签约，好，也就等于说要纳入国防部的管理。好，那所以这一点就是令那个 Prigozhin 非常的不满，也是他原以为他是普京所信赖的人，他在乌俄战争中他贡献了这么多力量，普京应该非常的支持他，可是他没有想到这一次的情况反而不是如此。好，他算错了，而且他也被利用了。所以呢，我们可以看见说，当他上来之后，他为什么没有遇到很多的一些阻拦，像一路没有流血就直接好像可以挥兵到莫斯科？我觉得这是在普京的一个忍受之下，他所应允的一个行动，也可能就是说他想要利用这一次的行动来增加他在人民心中的一个力量，让人民认为说他很快就可以控制全局。好，然后而且我认为最大的一个目的就是在于他想要就是2024年的总统大选，因为可能在俄乌战争当中，他可能会有一些阻碍或是怎么样，他想要排除这些阻碍，增加人民对他的支持率。所以呢，他以这一次完美的控制了这一次的行动来展现，他仍旧是2024年未来总统大选最有力的领导人。
So this attempt coup having been resolved in only 24 hours, it's actually not a signal of Putin's declining control. It's turned out as orchestrated to, in fact, amplify Putin's power hold.
其实这牵扯到普京的对于他对权力系统的一个控制。普京下面其实有很多的精英团体，那这些精英团体里面，普京都不会让它过于壮大，他会去培养另外一个精英团体来对抗。那在早期的话，可能就是我们所说的 Siloviki 跟圣彼得堡邦之间的一个对抗。到2012年至2016年，强力集团有点过分壮大，所以呢，这时候普京就开始又在培养另外一批人马来对抗强力集团。这批人马就是我们所说的一些专业的一些科技官僚，包含现任的国防部长跟参谋总长，他们的地位必须依靠普京。那前面我们所说的强力集团已经自己丰满的羽翼了，已经渐渐在脱离普京的控制。在目前的一个俄罗斯的政局当中，可以说是强力集团跟科技官僚之间的一个对抗。那我们也可以看见说，其实在这早期的圣彼得堡邦其实已经开始没落了。这一次的行动，我们也可以看见，就是说，因为强力集团方面可能不太满意普京过分倚重这些专业的科技官僚，所以呢，他们也可能在这一次，我个人认为说，在这一次的我们说瓦格纳的一个行动之中，而去默许了这一次的行动。所以实际上，我认为普京并不是跟 Prigozhin 也就是瓦格纳达成协议。他背后达成协议的是强力集团，已经背后达成了某些协议，而不去过分倚重这些科技官僚。所以我觉得他在背后 Prigozhin 只是一个棋子，一个台面上的棋子。真正台面下达成协议的人，是强力集团跟普京。
So Jason, we just heard a great insights from Professor Hsu. So I remember that when Putin, he had some announcement in the news conference, he made references to the year 1917, implying that the coup could have potentially led to outcomes similar to the historical events. So, we all know that 1991 and 1917 and even 2023 this year. Could you elaborate on what Putin meant by, he mentioned the year 1991?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since Putin came into power, he's established himself as a strongman and instill a tight control on society. And he symbolizes himself as a man who can bring stability to the Russian society. And also under his rule, the projection of nationalism that Russian is a proud race and a nation that is something that he continues to instill in the society. However, the current precautions march our threat to Putin's rule is being compared with the 1991 Gorbachev's and as well as the collapse of Soviet Union. So obviously Putin senses this is a very alarming signal to his strong rule, and also the whole world is watching how the Russian civilian sector will react to such a uprising. But we still remain hard to gauge whether this will really truly create some sort of bottom-up unrest, which I am very doubtful because Putin still has a tight control over the state and as well as the media. But we have to wait to see how the rest of the Western world and as well as the other Putin's allied countries react and respond to this. But one thing can be sure, Putin's rule is under severe challenge and is very severely threatened.
But Jill, so how has the Wagner Group coup impacted Russia's invasion of Ukraine? So do you anticipate that the Ukrainian-Russia conflict coming to resolution soon due to this domestic conflict?
I think as soon as Wagner Group announced that they were marching to Moscow, the Ukrainian forces have launched quite a few successful counter-offensive, and there have been quite a result because of that. And I don't think this conflict is going to be end anytime soon. So we can. And on the other hand, the Wagner Group is probably the most vicious and the strongest part of the Russian war effort in Ukraine. So with the Wagner Group being disintegrated right now, I'm pretty sure that the Ukrainian will take this advantage and launch even more further counter-offensive to take more lost lands in the days to come. And so it has impacted quite severely into the heart of Russian sort of political stability, where you can see a lot of the military and security chiefs are now all gathered in Moscow and trying to stabilize the situation in Moscow. There is no way they have time or effort to focus on Ukraine right now.
You know, there was a sort of like a rumor going on, kind of floating around, saying that after all, the whole coup thing was only, served as a game, as a drama for the external Western world. Actually, the Prigozhin and also Putin and also even the Belarus president, they are all good friends. So they play this fake, in order to cut the Ukraine slack. So do you think that this is something that's a rumor?
I don't think so, because the implications of this entire ordeal has made Putin look weak. This is perhaps the worst Putin has seemed to the outside world for quite some time. There's been a long-standing common wisdom about Putin in Russia that he's untouchable, that he is rock solid in his regime, and this, as was recently pointed out, shows cracks in his regime. Now, I don't think it necessarily means the end of Putin or that there is going to be immediate leadership changes in Russia, but I think this is most certainly a very important political signal to anyone who is looking to either challenge Putin or is looking to change their own political status within Russia. I would be troubled to accept that this was just a show for the West. I think there was too much at stake and too much kind of hard evidence of Wagner troops attacking Russian troops for this to come across as just show.
Okay, Jason, so what about you? Do you think this is only merely as a show rather than something significantly indicates the starts of the Putin's to kind of decline his power?
Yeah, I don't think it's a show. I agree with what Lev has mentioned. I think Putin's leadership is severely challenged based on the dragged on Ukraine operation, as he would call it. Obviously, he's faced a very strong internal challenges within his own party elites that he is now being forced to act strongly and more aggressively. And also we've seen Western countries, leaders are also hesitant to make any statements or any response to such an uprising, mainly because this is, first of all, Russia's internal affair, and secondly, Prigozhin himself is a illegitimate challenger to Putin. So all of this suggests that Putin is now facing a very dire crisis in his own leadership. And I foresee that in the following days or even the next few months that the entire Putin regime would be severely under crisis. And I think he would face a very tough decision, especially Ukraine would be stepping up in their own resistance. And I also foresee that Western countries would also take a step further in addressing these issues.
Well, have said that, though, Prigozhin now is sent to Belarus. So would you say that this is something, still indicating Putin still in control? Maybe Ji-ho. Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, of course he's still in control, but the fact is his strongman image has been severely compromised. And I think that's a huge blow because the whole war effort on Ukraine or the whole governing of Russia is solely based on this, the people's contract, the social contract of Putin with the Russian people, that you need a strong leader, therefore you give up a little bit of your freedom so that I can rule the whole country with the iron fist. But it seems like that fist is probably not made of iron. And so in that sense, I don't think Prigozhin is sent to Belarus. He's probably going there on his own will. And he has benefited so much from all these the different civil wars in different parts of Syria and all these different parts of for the past decade or so. And so I see that as he's got what he wanted already. And the whole fiasco that happened for the past few days was only for Prigozhin to show the rest of the other security chiefs that if I can march into Moscow within 200 kilometers, so can you. And it shows that in those 2 days, in that one day, there are so many security chiefs or military units that just basically didn't put up a fight. They just let him go through. And so you can see that a lot of these people are swinging, they're choosing sides, and that is a huge blow.
Right. The whole Prigozhin-Putin drama is rather interesting. There's a report. Let me read this aloud to you. It was reported boxes of cash were discovered near an office in St. Petersburg intended for covering Wagner's expense. The total amount of the cash found in Prigozhin's office is approximately 46 million USD. Prigozhin's catering company, he's a cook, received sponsorship from Putin's government amounting to at least 1.9 billion. Okay, so it's surprising why Prigozhin ultimately decided to turn against Putin, or maybe Moscow more broadly, considering these favors. So what's wrong with them? Lev.
I think it's something we've known for some time, that Wagner has not been happy with the way that a lot of Russia's military leaders have been managing Russia's efforts in Ukraine. Wagner's been known to have asked for more ammunition, for better supplies, and not to be given them. And according to why they started this whole rampage to begin with was because they claimed that Russian troops had fired on Wagner troops. So even though he's making money, if the fundamental military unit that he's managing to help make this money is not being serviced properly from his perspective, then that's going to give him a context to not just show Putin that something is going wrong, but to show the rest of the Russian military that you need us for your efforts, which I think is largely true. Wagner's group has been the most effective part of their war in Ukraine. The Russian military has not been nearly as competent as Wagner's group has been. But I also think it's kind of worth acknowledging that what we're discussing here are two different groups who both want to kill Ukrainian people and want to invade Ukraine. It's just a matter of they disagree on the most effective way of doing that. And so ultimately, we're still talking about something quite tragic, even though many people were cheering on Wagner for attacking Russia. At the end of the day, they're not exactly saints. They're evildoers just as much as the Russian military.
Right. So I mean, it's worthwhile to notice that Prigozhin himself is still pretty loyal to Putin and also this type of ideology, instead of he's kind of changed his mind to become a friend of Ukraine. Okay, it's different. Okay, now let's delve into a matter that deeply concerns people when it comes to Western countries. Ukraine included facing off against Russia. The potential use of nuclear weapons. Since the onset of the Ukraine war, Putin has made several statements indicating that he does not rule out the use of nuclear power as the means to deter his enemies. Some argue that one of the reasons Western leaders have remained silent during the Wagner Coup is to prevent Putin from using their words as an accusation against the West, potentially initiating a nuclear attack, particularly in regions like Crimea. Okay, so I think given the circumstances, do you believe there is still a significant likelihood of Putin resorting to the use of nuclear weapon in the end? Maybe Jiho first. Yeah.
I think it's less likely because Putin's power has been challenged. So I think so far what's stopping Putin from using his nuclear weapons has been because he knew that once that happens, all hell can break loose. Right. And his troops, his grip on power will be severely challenged or even toppled. So by knowing how fragile his grip on power is through this event, I think he's less likely to use nuclear weapons as a result.
What about you, Jason?
Yeah, Putin is clearly weakened compared with what he was a few months ago. And in order to use any type of nuclear capabilities, he has to project himself as a man of power. And he's clearly not a man of power right now. And so he probably faces an even more severe internal pressure just to secure his position as a leader. So in an attempt to use an extreme measure such as nuclear capabilities, he would need to mobilize internal support, which he doesn't have right now. And obviously this is probably the weakest point of Putin's leadership since the beginning of the Ukraine invasion. So this also opened up an opportunity for Ukraine and other Western countries to address this issue and perhaps to bring in Putin's in reign.
Okay, let me put a question in a different way. So maybe Lev, under what condition do you think Putin would be more inclined to employ such extreme measures?
I think it would really have to be a sign that Putin himself is under such a strong threat that the regime itself faces a challenge, which I do not think it currently does. Or if the United States or the West were to escalate to that degree, which they're most certainly not going to. I mean, the whole reason the United States is not physically involved with the war in Ukraine is because of the fear of nuclear escalation. That's everyone's number one primary concern. And that's why I do not think that it is going to escalate to that degree, because that is a Pandora's box that once opened is completely irreversible. Putin knows that. And this kind of threat to his power, while bad, I think it would to respond with nuclear weapons of any kind, even Putin being as mad as he is, would not resort to that right now.
But don't you think the Prigozhin's coup was sort of like that kind of scenario where Putin, if the coup could have been succeeding?
Yeah, and this is where I think it's important to keep in mind the degree of what transpired. Again, I don't think this is the end of Putin. I don't think that this coup attempt is going to be the toppling of Putin. I think we need to be careful not to overstate what has happened. Putin is still in power. The coup is not successful.
Right.
I think a lot of the statements tend to overstate just how far it went. And Putin himself is a strong authoritarian who knows how to punish those who have challenged him. And the fact that he is still around and still in power and still has control of the Russian state, I do not think that this is by any means a immediate threat to his power. Of course, we have to wait and see how the next few months play out. But as of today, Putin himself is not really directly being challenged to the degree that I think a lot of people might foresee it as.
Yeah, so it looks like the 1991 is still a distant memory in the past. So, and also, like, I wonder how can the West better prepare for this type of possibility?
The possibility of Putin
you using the nuclear.
I think that is one of the biggest concerns that the United States has is if things really go to that degree, what do we do? I think that is the worst case scenario around the world, is any sort of use of nuclear arms. And I think it's the matter of every military around the world trying to understand what would protocols be if it comes to that. It's something that I know us in the Asia Pacific are increasingly concerned about with North Korea. It's something that I think people are increasingly concerned about with China. And of course, we're concerned about it with Russia. So even though I don't think the possibility of it happening today or tomorrow is likely, I still think it's perhaps the biggest thing on everyone's mind, because we should be thinking about worst case scenarios and how to respond to them.
Okay, it is crucial to remember that Russia still maintains its position as a leading nuclear power with 5,977 warheads, surpassing the combined total of the warheads possessed by NATO countries. This partly explains Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as North Korea's ability to threaten to disrupt regional stability and China's assertiveness in claiming land such as Taiwan. So, we can never forget that, still, however, we think that Russia is not as strong as we remember, at this time point, it's still very strong in terms of using the nuclear power. So my question goes to Jason. I wonder, though, if we talk about another country, Belarus, Putin actually confirmed the transfer of nuclear weapons to Belarus. So what role does Belarus play, both as Russia's ally and in terms of Russia's nuclear strategy?
Well, obviously, Belarus being probably the closest ally to Russia now seems to have some sort of leverage on Putin now. And obviously, he's seen Putin being weakened. Now it also provides Belarus a chance to develop some sort of alliance and leverage in order to work in their own favor. And we still have to be wait and see to see whether Belarus would take a step further now that Belarus invite the Prigozhin to the Belarus and to see how this whole thing will unfold. So we'll still have to wait and see to see what happens right now.
Okay, either Belarus, Russia, they all have to do with Ukraine, right? So can we conclude that the Ukrainian forces have been successful so far in combating the Russian military forces without provoking Putin to resort to the use of nuclear weapons, even though Putin several times said that he's going to use that? So do you think that now, so far, so good for Ukraine to keep in that kind of advantage, maybe, Jiho?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Ukrainian war effort has been pretty successful in keeping it at ground level at a scale of guerrilla warfare in urban settings and other other kinds of settings. They are all kept on a smaller scale, and it didn't escalate into anything more serious. And so in that sense, I would agree with our other guest of today, is that Putin he knows better not to stir up the situation into a more devastating one. So in that sense, I would say that nuclear threat has always been more like a rhetoric for Putin than an actual option. Even from the very beginning. So and because at the very beginning, Putin thought he would take Ukraine in 3 days, and that didn't happen. It lasted for more than 1.5 years now. So I'm pretty sure that if you have kept it without nuclear a possibility for the past year or so, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
So it looks like they, both Ukraine and also Russia wants to fight a war without nuclear. And I mean, eventually they're gonna be a winner, gonna be a loser in the end. But without that option there. And also, let me wonder, could the approach of the non-intervention on, so like indirect assistance by Western countries to Ukraine being a contributing factor in deterring Russia from deploying nuclear weapons. Do you agree with this?
Absolutely. I think we've seen an unprecedented level of support from Ukraine's allies. I think of places like Germany, which has even given military supplies to Ukraine, which is something that I think no one thought we would ever see happen during this war. I think the fact that there has been such a global response in support of Ukraine has not only sent a major signal to authoritarian states around the world about what happens when one wages war, but specifically to Putin, that his initial campaign of thinking that this would be a very fast and very efficient operation was not only not true, but that the world has Ukraine's back, and that the world is not going to simply sit aside and let something like this happen.
So Jason, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think the whole world is obviously watching this unfold with very careful and strategic mindset in thinking what then should be the next steps for the Ukraine situation. And countries such as Germany and US would probably look even further into what would happen in the next 90 days and how would Ukraine respond. And also another important country to look at is China. What's on Xi Jinping's mind when he see, his friend without limits is now facing such a dire threat. So all of this are, pointing to quite a unstable development over that region. And I do want to note one thing though. I think Putin is a unpredictable leader. So whether he would be pushed to the corner to resort to the extreme measures of any type of nuclear arms, I think that's the probability even is low, but I think it remains there. And we all have to be very careful in assessing the situation, especially knowing the type of man that he is.
Well, we know that Ukrainian war in the progress on this whole thing is slow but steady. I'm thinking about the Ukrainian army kind of taking revenge, making some progress, very slow, inch by inch in the eastern part of the Ukraine. But I guess my question would be very ultimately, any one of you think that the war is possible to conclude this year? Any of you?
I think it really remains to be seen what the outcome from this recent event in Russia turns out to be, because we're still in the middle of understanding the implications for what happened this last week. It's kind of too soon to know. And second, I think it's a matter of how far Ukraine can push back in their own efforts to retake what's been lost during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, even a year is a long time, so I would be hesitant to make any sort of strong prediction right now. But at the very least, I think there's a lot of very big variables out there that I think we're all just very eagerly waiting to see if they increase or decrease the likelihood of this conflict finally ending.
Sounds like a statistical models that you have to include a lot of independent variables. But we remain optimistic. What about you, Jiho? You think the war is going to end?
I think in Putin's words, yes. He compared himself to the 1917 coup. Okay. And the result of that is the Tsar is toppled. So if he compares himself to that, that means he sees his power being shaken so much that this is the beginning of the end for him. So, but it says his own word. That's the message he's trying to send. I'm not saying I can predict what might happen in the coming months, but he wants to tell the world that I'm about to end this. My reign is probably going to end in a very short time. That's the message he was sending.
So he foresees his future failure. Is that what you suggest?
I don't know how. We can read it however we want, but that's the message.
Right.
A clear example, analogy that he was sending.
Okay.
This is 1917. This is 1991, and they both resulted in demise.
So Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I think
I'm curious.
the fact that he faces such a dire crisis is a signal to the world that Putin has many vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities are very clear and very large to his own demise. So the very reason that he alluded this coup to a 1917 collapse, I think it's in a way that he is also giving himself a kind of warning to the rest of the world that he might resort to extreme measures. And this is something that we have to be careful. A strongman like him rarely makes such a weakening message speech to the rest of the world.
Okay. Let's now discuss the broader implication of the Wagner Coup for China and Taiwan. So Jiho, despite the eventual failure of the coup, do you believe it serves as a cautionary lesson for President Xi Jinping regarding the potential consequences of invading Taiwan?
Yes, definitely, absolutely. Although there's no mercenary group in China that serves like a counterpart to the Wagner Group, but we can see that the same level of corruption, or even more severe, is taking place in the Chinese military and in the Chinese leadership. And you can also see that tons and tons of the families of the leaders have their assets and their families moved elsewhere, especially in the United States. And given that as a premise, you can see that as if I were Xi Jinping, I would have a hard time trusting my own Gerasimov, my own Shoigu, and my own other security chiefs, because you never know how loyal they can be to you. And being in a similar sort of governing structure, and also the sort of a similar political ambitions, I think this is, of course, a very much a cautionary tale for Xi Jinping. First, it's not going to be fast and easy to take over a piece of land that does not belong to you. And secondly, inner conflict will arise sooner or later if the war prolongs, and it happens right in front of our eyes. And when the war first broke out, we all predicted that something like this might happen, and it happens. So of course it's almost scientific for Xi Jinping that so this is going to happen.
I think you made a great point that this coup really made Xi Jinping even harder to trust people around him. Okay. Especially the force from PLA, because we all know that Communist Party, they heavily rely on the gun, right? Gun really provides them with the political capability to rule the country. So maybe for Levy, is that what reforms to the PLA and the Central Military Commission has Xi Jinping, in your perspective, passed during his first term to eliminate chances of such possible internal challenges?
Yeah, so everything that we know is in such a black box that what exactly information Xi Jinping has, what exactly his relationship is to the PLA, we don't know. We get glimpses and bits of information. For example, the big balloon scandal. There were so many theories about this was the PLA going against Xi Jinping, and there were intel rumors of Xi Jinping maybe not even knowing about the balloon scandal. That tells us that maybe there's something that we don't entirely understand about the PLA and Xi Jinping's relationship. And this is one of the biggest challenges of trying to understand a place like the PRC is that there are so many what we would call known unknowns, things we just don't know. And this is one of the biggest challenges for us is we do not exactly know who exactly Xi is trusting within his circle. But I think it is correct to assume that this is going to definitely change how Xi relates to those around him. I think we often think of the same dilemma that Putin also has, which is that Xi surrounds himself likely with people that want to make Xi happy and tell him things that he wants to hear. And that is going to be a challenge for Xi Jinping going forward, is how to navigate that, knowing after seeing what happened in Russia, questioning whether or not his own circle is secure.
Well, I mean, that's a challenge definitely because the decision-making process of the CCP is always murky, different from the decision-making process, of countries like the United States. Even though sometimes we do have, seen president like Trump, this kind of more like a populist, but still it's more predictable that we know what's going on. Now I want to move the kind of shift the gear a bit, talking about the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, his meeting with President Xi in Beijing. Blinken actually stated that he saw no evidence of China's support for Russia. However, the Wagner Coup sends a signal of Russia's weakening. So maybe Jason, do you think that China might still intervene to support Russia, which is against the will of United States, to ensure that NATO and Ukraine do not gain the upper hand?
Highly unlikely. President Xi Jinping wants to see a weakened Putin, and a weakened Putin plays in his own favor, in China's favor. And judging from the current situation, this is probably the best time that China could intervene in a way that would provide more advantage for Xi Jinping to be kind of the leader of the communist world. It's highly unlikely that they will provide any military assistance or intervene militarily or to support Putin rhetorically or publicly or even make any political statements with respect to this. And we've also seen since Blinken met with Xi, the two sides have been trying to find the common ground to work together on the items that they see the need and the necessity to work together, although the two countries still see there's a lot of discrepancies in how they view the power and also on the Taiwan issue, but obviously on the economic front and as well as other areas that such as climate change, US and China obviously need to find common ground to work together. So now it's not the best time for Xi to assert his power in this regard, in this matter, or to meddle with Putin in order to be like a big brother. But to him right now, a weakened Russia is in Xi's favor. And he will just continue to watch this deteriorate and then reap the benefits.
Weaker Russia is Xi's favorite, but some arguments would also go like this. Xi definitely does not want to see Russia, collapsed, because otherwise China would have become a the biggest enemy of the United States. That the United States would, go on to deal with China.
Yeah, obviously not to the extreme of collapsed Russia. He will continue to keep Russia as sort of his wingman or sidekick, and the communist world needs a communist Russia to be in existence in order for Xi to remain the king of the communist world. But a weakened Russia is in China's interest.
Okay, so let's talk about Taiwan. What can Taiwanese do, Taiwanese government do? So what can Taiwanese government learn from the Wagner Coup, especially in the context of the Ukrainian war? Maybe left.
I think, hopefully this is a further sign to Taiwan that more of its own domestic military support is needed, and that we need more reforms like we've seen the last year from the Tsai government, things like the conscription extension to 1 year, and that there needs to be more preparedness for both medium case to worst case scenarios, things from soft blockade, hard blockade to invasion preparedness. I think everything that happens in Russia and Ukraine is just another very important reminder to Taiwan that it needs to focus on its own preparedness as much as it possibly can, which of course Taiwan is doing its best to do so, but I think this is just a further reminder, not just for the Taiwanese government, but for the Taiwanese people as well, that the possibility of these kinds of conflicts happening are very real.
Okay, so Jiho, we know that the assistance to Ukraine from the United States and also NATO countries was indirect and also still is indirect. So that really implies something, similar in Taiwan. So do you think that the indirect assistance provided by the United States sufficient for Taiwan to effectively deter a potential PLA's invasion?
Not if we also have our own preparedness ready. I agree with Lev in the sense that if we were to learn anything from the Wagner Group coup or the Ukrainian war so far, is that we have to think about how long we can hold our enemies at bay. We have to think hard about how prepared we are to face a situation where sometimes the resources can be scarce, sometimes there will be air raids and whatnot. And so if we have that in mind, and if we are in this mindset of preparedness, I think, yes, indirect U.S. aids will combine with our own preparedness, we can put it through.
Okay, so we're actually making some efforts now. In Taiwan, even though the idea is still floating around and cause a lot of debates, right? We got several planned reforms, such as 3-year college education requirements and also 1-year military training, as well as efforts to ensure our citizens are aware of the nearest air raid shelters. Okay, so what are your thoughts, Jason, on these policies? Any room to improve still, or you think this is not a policy good at all?
Well, I think the whole awareness of a potential China's invasion needs to be raised among the citizens level. So it's not just for those who are in the conscription age, but also for those in the reserve as well. And so this requires the total mobility of the whole of the nation.
War exacts a heavy toll, costing lives and shattering families. The Ukrainian war, with its numerous tragic stories, holding valuable lessons for Taiwan in safeguarding itself against potential invasion by the Chinese Communist Party. In this episode, we discuss the latest developments in the Ukrainian war, particularly the Wagner Coup in Russia and its implication for the future of the region. We will continue to closely monitor the situation. Did you enjoy our show? Leave a comment on our YouTube channel and remember to subscribe for the future updates. Until next time, take care.